I froze, the plate in my hand slipping through my fingers and shattering against the tiled floor. Standing in my kitchen, holding a mug from my cabinet, was a man I had never seen before. A stranger. A black guy, tall, with a calm demeanor that made the situation feel even more surreal. His eyes met mine, unbothered, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. "Who are you?" My voice barely escaped my throat. He took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "You must be Emma." Hearing my name from his mouth was jarring. The weight of it made my stomach twist. And then, just as I opened my mouth to demand an explanation, I heard the unmistakable creak of the bedroom door opening upstairs. That's when I knew everything was about to change. My name is Emma Carter, and for the last 10 years, I've been married to Daniel, a man I thought I knew inside and out. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of building a life together. He was my rock, my partner, in every sense of the word. At least, that's what I believed. Our home was a modest 2-story house in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where the neighbors wave but keep their distance. The kitchen, where I now stood paralyzed by the sight of a stranger, was the heart of our home. It had soft yellow walls, a wooden dining table that Daniel had built himself, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee that lingered most mornings. But now, it felt like unfamiliar territory, tainted by the presence of someone who didn't belong. Daniel had always been the steady one in our relationship. He worked as a project manager at a tech firm, a job he seemed to love despite its long hours. I'd carved out my own niche as a freelance graphic designer, which allowed me to stay home and take care of the little things, groceries, bills, making sure the house didn't fall apart. We didn't have kids yet, though it was something we'd talked about in that vague, someday kind of way. We weren't perfect, of course. No marriage is. There were arguments about money, about Daniel's work trips that seemed to stretch longer than they should, about the silences that had grown between us over the years. But I always chalked it up to the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. People grow, I told myself. Sometimes together, sometimes apart. But lately there had been something different. A shift. Daniel had been distracted, his phone always glued to his hand, his responses to my questions short and perfunctory. He started taking calls in the other room, claiming it was work-related, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'd even caught him lying once, something small, insignificant, but it planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. And now here I was, standing in my own kitchen, staring at a man I didn't recognize. His presence was unsettling, not because he seemed threatening, but because he seemed comfortable, like he belonged here. His charcoal gray sweater hung loosely on his frame, and his hands, large and calloused, cradled my favorite ceramic mug. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps upstairs, Daniel's, unmistakably. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Who was this man, and why was he acting like this was his home? And why hadn't Daniel come down yet? I stared at the man in my kitchen, my thoughts spiraling out of control. He was calm, too calm. He set the mug down on the counter with a deliberate slowness, like he wasn't in any rush to explain himself. My pulse pounded in my ears as I gripped the edge of the counter for support. "Who are you, and what the hell are you doing in my house?" My voice was sharper this time, cutting through the tense silence. The man tilted his head slightly, as if debating how much to tell me. "My name's Marcus," he said finally, his voice deep and even. "I think it's better if Daniel explains." Daniel. Hearing his name from this stranger sent a cold shiver down my spine. Upstairs, the faint sound of footsteps had stopped. I imagined Daniel standing just out of sight, listening, waiting. "No," I shook my head, my voice trembling. "You don't get to drop something like that and leave me hanging. Why are you here? Why do you know my name? And why does Daniel need to explain anything?" Marcus crossed his arms, leaning casually against the counter like we were having a friendly chat. "Look, I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said, his tone infuriatingly neutral. "But if you're asking me, you already know something's off." I opened my mouth to argue, but his words hit too close to home. Something was off, had been for months. The late nights, the secrecy, The way Daniel seemed to drift further and further away from me. And now this. Emma? Daniel's voice broke through the tension like a crack of thunder. I turned to see him standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face pale, his hands gripping the banister like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He looked between me and Marcus, his expression a mix of guilt and panic. "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. Daniel hesitated, glancing at Marcus as if seeking his permission to speak. That small, fleeting moment of deference made my stomach drop. "Daniel," I pressed, "talk to me. Who is this man, and why is he in our house?" He stepped forward, his hands raised as if to calm me. "Emma, I can explain. Please, just let me explain." "You'd better," I snapped, the fury in my voice masking the ache in my chest. Daniel exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair, a habit he'd always had when he was stressed. "Marcus and we've known each other for a while now," he began. He's someone I've been seeing." For a moment, I didn't understand. The words didn't make sense, didn't fit into the reality I thought I was living. "Seeing?" I repeated, the word foreign on my tongue. Daniel's eyes met mine, filled with a sorrow that felt almost patronizing. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he said softly. It hit me then like a punch to the gut. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the counter tighter to keep myself upright. "You're cheating on me?" The words were barely a whisper, choked out through the lump in my throat. "Emma, it's not that simple," Daniel said quickly, stepping closer. "Not that simple." I snapped, my voice rising. "You're having an affair, Daniel. You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and you think it's not that simple?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting this level of confrontation. I shot him a glare, my anger flaring hotter. "And you," I said, turning on him. "You come into my house, drink from my mug, and act like this is all normal? Who does that?" "I didn't mean to disrespect you," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not the one who's been lying to you." His words felt like a slap, and I turned back to Daniel, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "How long?" I demanded. Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation spoke volumes. "Almost a year," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "A year." 12 months of lies, of him coming home to me like nothing was wrong. The weight of it all was suffocating. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Was I not enough? Did our marriage mean nothing to you?" Daniel's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had promised to stand by me through anything. "Emma, I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't." I cut him off, my anger boiling over. "You don't get to say that. Not after this. Not after him." I gestured to Marcus, who stood silently, watching the unraveling of my life with a stoic expression. "I didn't plan for this to happen," Daniel said desperately. It just did. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said bitterly. "You've managed to do just that." The room fell into a heavy silence, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and a gnawing sense of betrayal. How had I been so blind, so naive? And yet, beneath the anger and heartbreak, there was something else, a flicker of uncertainty, a question I wasn't ready to face. What now? The silence hung heavy in the room, as if all the air had been sucked out, leaving only the weight of everything unsaid. I looked at Daniel, the man I thought I knew, and Marcus, the stranger whose presence had shattered my world. My mind churned, trying to grasp the enormity of what was happening. Finally, I found my voice, though it wavered. "Why?" I asked, staring directly at Daniel. "Why would you do this to us?" "To me?" Daniel exhaled, his shoulders slumping as though the weight of his guilt was too much to bear. "It wasn't about you, Emma," he said softly, his voice laced with regret. "I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it wasn't. I've been struggling. With who I am. With who I've always been." I blinked, his words swirling in my mind. Struggling? Struggling with what? Daniels? He looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. With myself, he admitted. For so long, I told myself I could be the man you deserved. The man society expected me to be. I thought I could bury certain parts of myself. But I was lying to you, and to me. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. You're gay? I asked, the words barely audible, as if saying them would make this more real. Daniel's eyes finally met mine, glistening with unshed tears. I don't know if I'd call it that, he said hesitantly. I think it's more complicated than that. But I know that I care about Marcus. He makes me feel things I've been suppressing for years. Suppressing. That word echoed in my mind like a cruel taunt. For years, I'd thought we were building a life together, a partnership based on trust and love. But now I realized that I'd only been seeing half of the man I married. I turned to Marcus, who had been silent throughout Daniel's confession. And you? I asked, my voice sharp. Did you know he was married? Did you care? Marcus nodded solemnly. I knew, he admitted. And no, I didn't want to get involved at first. But he hesitated, his gaze steady. I also knew Daniel was struggling. He needed someone who understood him, someone who could help him figure out who he really is. I let out a bitter laugh, though it felt more like a sob. So, you decided to help him destroy his marriage in the process? How noble of you. Emma, it's not like that, Daniel interjected. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear I didn't. But the more time I spent with Marcus, the more I realized I couldn't keep living this lie. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. Scared. I repeated, my voice rising. You were scared? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? Tears streamed down my face, and I didn't bother wiping them away. You let me believe we were happy. That we had a future. You let me make plans for us, for a family, all while you were lying to me. Lying to yourself. Daniel's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the pain in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. I didn't know how to tell you, he said again, his voice breaking. I didn't want to lose you, Emma. You've been my best friend, my partner. I didn't want to hurt you. But I didn't know how to live with myself, either. His words hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me under. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I just stood there, trembling, my hands clutching the counter as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. I loved you, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I loved you with everything I had. And you couldn't even give me the truth. Daniel stepped forward, his hands outstretched as if to comfort me, but I flinched away. Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare touch me. The room fell silent again, the three of us caught in a web of betrayal, regret, and truths that couldn't be undone. I could see the guilt etched into Daniel's face, the quiet resolve in Marcus's. But none of it mattered. The damage was done. As I stood there, my world crumbling around me, a single thought echoed in my mind. How do you rebuild when the foundation was never real? For days after that moment, I felt like I was floating outside of myself, watching my life unravel from a distance. Daniel moved out the following morning, leaving behind an emptiness that was both physical and emotional. The house felt different without him, quieter, colder, and yet somehow clearer. I spent hours replaying his words, searching for signs I might have missed. Were there hints in the way he held me, the silences that stretched too long between us, or the way he smiled when he thought no one was watching? Had I ever truly known him? Or had I been in love with the version of him he'd tried so desperately to be? Marcus was gone too, though I wasn't sure whether he and Daniel had ended things or were trying to make a new life together. It didn't matter. I wasn't ready to think about their story because I was still piecing together my own. Some days, anger consumed me, a fire that burned bright and fast, leaving me exhausted and hollow. Other days, it was grief. Grief for the life I thought we had, the future I dreamed of, the love that had felt so real. But beneath it all, there was a strange, unwelcome sense of understanding. Daniel hadn't betrayed me out of malice. He'd betrayed me out of fear, out of a desperate need to find himself. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it made me see him differently. He wasn't the villain in this story, nor was I the victim. We were just two people who had built something beautiful on an unstable foundation, only to watch it crumble when the truth came to light. As time passed, I began to rebuild. Slowly, hesitantly, I started rediscovering who I was outside of our marriage. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and found solace in the quiet strength of being alone. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Daniel, but I hope one day I can. Not for his sake, but for mine. Because holding on to the pain will only keep me tethered to a past that no longer exists. Standing in my kitchen one morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, I realized something. The life I thought I had is gone, but I'm still here. And maybe that's enough.
For now.